if you're portal shopping, there's a couple of ways to approach. You can go bargain shopping and try and change the whole wardrobe, or you can say, I'm going to go big money, try and get that Gucci suit, and maybe change the optics around my program. We'll talk more about that today on the Hard Count. Welcome in, baby, to the People's College Football Show. It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, last one on the face of the planet. The portal's still buzzing. We got names filing in as we speak. You got Darian Mensah, one of the top quarterbacks in the portal, previously at Tulane, has just committed to Duke. Now, I'll be honest, this was one that caught me a little bit off guard. We'll talk more about that commitment in tomorrow's show as we get some more information as to why Duke was the spot for him. I said yesterday, man, I think SEC is the spot for him. He decides to take his talents to Duke, and we'll be playing in the ACC under Manny Diaz. And maybe he just saw the Malik Murphy blueprint and said, you know what, that's good enough for me. Go get a nice degree out there in Durham, North Carolina, play some ball, sling it around. Darian Mensah is headed to Duke. In addition to that portal news, we got a couple of other commitments, I believe, that are right around the corner. This is not an intel segment, but we're going to do our best here to play matchmaker for some of the top targets in the transfer portal when it comes to the wide receiver position. You got Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, who's the top player in the transfer portal as of right now. He's got some visits on the docket to a couple of SEC schools. I think there's a couple of these different receivers, though, that would fit best at certain spots. So we'll do our best to try and kind of align the stars a little bit, see where we could see them fitting, both schematically and then for their own personal benefit. We'll unpack that one together in just a little bit. But before we get to that, I want us to talk a little bit about how the current state of the college football playoff, I think, is just indicative of where college football is right now, period, when it comes to building your roster. Like, we say this a lot in different like game preview videos, how styles make fights, right? Kind of the buzzword. I think another way to say that is it has never been more important to be able to be well-rounded in the sport of college football than ever before. So this is going to pertain to the college football playoff, but this segment now, this applies to you if you're a Virginia Tech fan, if you're a Purdue fan, whoever you root for now, this is going to apply for you. So before we move forward, welcome to the Hard Count. Make sure you are subscribed. College football, nothing but college football every single day. Want y'all dialed in, and we appreciate y'all being dialed in. So, like I said, yesterday's price to winning a national championship is not what today's price is. Think about the last couple of national champions. Those national title games, from Michigan versus Washington to Georgia and TCU, it was a talent gap, I believe, between those two teams when it came to those matchups. And also, I think more specifically, more visibly, was a disparity in the trenches between what those two teams had. That was the most visible gap. Because it used to be make the college football playoff, make that four-team format, make that four-team tournament, if you will, win 2 games, you're a national champ. Now, in the new era of college football, we've said this a lot, you got to win 3, potentially 4 games to win a national championship. What does that mean? It means there's more chances to get got than ever before. It means when you look at this 12-team bracket now, what is required to beat a Clemson is going to be different than what's required to eventually beat a Georgia or beat a Oregon, or fill in the blank with whoever you want to talk about within that context of this entire playoff. You say, well, JD, we have elite trenches. We're just going to steamroll everybody. That's awesome. What about when you're down 14-0 and you don't have elite receiver play and your quarterback's maybe a little bit dinged up? Georgia, looking at you right now. I love how Georgia's built. Preseason, I picked them to win the whole darn thing. As of right now, look at that bracket. I like where they're at currently in the college football playoff when it comes to how they're seeded. But I wouldn't like them if you copy and pasted Georgia from one side to the other and you say, hey, Georgia, you got to go play Oregon. You got to play Ohio State. And that's not because I don't think Georgia could beat those teams, but I'm saying from a matchup perspective now, it is a lot more difficult for Georgia to climb the mountain with what they don't have at the wide receiver position and potentially what they may or may not have at the quarterback position. Now, I'm not selling my Georgia stock, but I do think it's worth taking inventory of as you watch these teams get after it here in the transfer portal. Because what I spoke about at the open, I think, is exactly how I feel about this whole deal going forward. It has never been more possible for you to bargain shop and change the way that your wardrobe looks, change the way that your roster looks via the transfer portal. You got 2 teams in here, in SMU and Indiana, that I think are living testaments to that. Indiana, they took 31 transfers, a year removed from winning 1 Big Ten game. They're 4 games away from winning the national championship right now. Why? Because of obviously who their head coach is, but in large part because they bargain shopped and because they went out and got themselves a high volume of transfers that buy into what Kirsten Netty does and are able to be successful because of it. It's not like they went out and got a $3 million quarterback. I don't know what Curtis Rourke's price point was, but I don't think it was the same as what a Cam Ward's would have been. Same deal with SMU. They went out and got 20-plus transfers, 22 to be exact. That's a massive reason why they were able to make that pivot from the G5 to the ACC and now be in the college football playoff. And so as we speak to the college football playoff and just college football on a macro level, when it comes to Styles winning fights, we said this back in the summer, man. Like, I think this new playoff format is going to resemble a lot of how the NFL format is. Now, that's not something we're all that big on, transparently. Y'all know how I feel about the NFL on this show. Pro NFL, enjoy it on Sundays. College football has our heart. But I think we'd be wise now to watch the Sunday game and say, okay, why do the Chiefs keep winning Super Bowls? Why does Tom Brady have enough rings to fill darn near both his hands? Because of the quarterback position. Because Pat Mahomes now, in situations where the Chiefs may not have all the advantages on the line of scrimmage, they may be outmatched here or there, they got a dude at quarterback who can make the difference. In addition to that, you have a quarterback who can elevate your skill on the perimeter to make the difference. In addition to that, you have what? A great play caller to make the difference and maximize those matchups for you. So when you look across the college football playoff bracket now, there's a couple of coordinators where I'm like, hey, this is on you. Like, we know full well that Clemson may not have the most talent in this whole dance. Penn State, a lot of talent, not as much as Oregon, not as much as Ohio State. They still, I think, are at a talent deficiency when it comes to that discussion. They're within striking distance, but if they're going to win a national championship or win a couple of games in this whole thing, Clemson especially, Garrett Riley needs you to be able to find those matchups and exploit those matchups for us. So what I'm trying to say here is it's a game of matchups more so than it has ever been. Big people still move small people. You cannot just be, you cannot be broke in the trenches and expect to win football games. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is now if you have enough in the trenches and you got some dudes in the perimeter at wide receiver that can change the game for you, got a quarterback that's good enough to go win a couple games for you, you can make a run at this thing. You can make a run at this thing. And that's a big reason why SMU and Indiana are in the dance, because they went out and flipped those rosters, and Indiana specifically got themselves a quarterback to be competitive. So at the end of the day here, styles make fights. Styles will make the fights here in the college football playoff. Styles will continue to make fights more than ever before in the new era of college football in the transfer portal. If you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed like I mentioned. Make sure you've liked the video. We're going to have a lot of fun this week, man. Tomorrow, we are giving you our full college football playoff prediction. All right, so we're going to game by game here. We're not going to do the full in-depth analysis and break down every single matchup. We'll give you our picks, though. That is, of course, a little bit tipping our hand on what the first-round predictions for us will be. Regardless, stay tuned in. We'll have that for you tomorrow, as well as some program awards, giving out some postseason individual hardware, as we have now the last 2 years. Want to make sure y'all know, too, this show, The Hard Count, brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. I mentioned the program awards. Giving a couple away tomorrow. I guarantee you now some guys that have won some program awards for us on this show already and will win some tomorrow, they have been good to us on Prize Picks. So if you want to follow us on Prize Picks, you want to follow our plays there, code HARDCOUNT gets you $5, or when you play $5 in lineups, you get $50 in promo funds. We're going to swing big this postseason, all right? So follow on the socials and use that code HARDCOUNT, to get you some promo funds, get you some credits to get after it with us over there on that platform. So appreciate y'all using that code and appreciate Prize Picks, again, bringing y'all the hard count today. So the transfer portal is continuing to absolutely pop off. And I think when you look at the position that is most intriguing, if you will, when it comes to this portal cycle, so far at least, it's been wide receiver. And I think to give a disclaimer to this segment, as we look at the college football playoff, as we look at college football in general, I think it's starting to trend more and more to where it is absolutely crucial to have guys at wide receiver that can make the difference for you, as we just spoke about in that previous segment. Like, we look at schools like Georgia, and Georgia's still Georgia. Do not get it twisted. But there's question marks around Georgia. Why? Because of what they don't have at that position, at wide receiver. You look at Ohio State. It didn't look all that great against Michigan, but there's a little bit of a, hey, what could they be any given game, because you got Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka on the perimeter for you. Like, that could just be the day. You may not have every single matchup, but if you have the wide receiver position, there's a certain amount of, like, ain't no telling to any team within this bracket. So, with that being said, I mentioned a lot of the top players in this portal are at the wide receiver position. Specifically for us here at On 3, at last I checked, you have, I believe, 3 of the top 4 players, and that's subject to change, but a myriad of the top players within the transfer portal for us right now at on3.com are at the wide receiver position. So I want to go through here and talk about a couple specific difference makers at this position and try and play some matchmaker, if you will. So this isn't a prediction, this is not intel, but just where we could see them fitting and maybe being difference makers this time next year. Let's start with the number one player in the whole darn portal. That's Eric Singleton. Receiver at Georgia Tech. Tore it up each of his 2 seasons there, over 700 yards. I mean, averaged 14 yards a catch on his career at Georgia Tech. Got a couple of SEC visits lined up. You hear Georgia in the mix for him. You hear, I believe, Auburn in the mix for him. I think Ole Miss makes the most sense. Because if I'm Eric Singleton, I don't want to go somewhere where I'm not 100% sure I'm going to have a guy at quarterback. Now, Gunnar Stockton, we'll see what he is at Georgia. 100% true. Auburn, they're going to go try and land a guy in the portal. I fully believe that when it comes to the quarterback position. However, I'm looking at Ole Miss, and I'm like, man, Austin Simmons, in a very small sample size against Georgia that one drive, he was slinging the pill around the yard. If I'm Eric Singleton, you got Trey Harris leaving the league. Probably will be a more major focal point of the offense if I do go there. Also, like there's a portal blueprint for success at that position with the Juice Wells, and I don't think Juice Wells had that great a year this year. Trey Harris is probably the poster child for portal success at that wide receiver position for Ole Miss. So Ole Miss makes a ton of sense to me, and that would be the spot that I would look most closely if I were Eric Singleton and making my selection when it comes to my next destination. Kevin Concepcion, not Kevin Conception, Kevin Concepcion. Little accent on that. Couple of SEC schools in the mix for him. I think Alabama makes a lot of sense for the NC State transfer. Like, if I'm him, I rewind the clock a little bit and I check out that 2023 season where I saw Kalen DeBoer just eat greedy with a stacked wide receiving core. You got Rome Odunze in the league. You got Jalen Polk. I mean, you got Jeremy Bernard in that receiving core is now Alabama. Like, you look at what Kalen DeBoer does when he has weapons, everybody eats. Everybody eats. And we'll see what they are at quarterback, but I do know this. Ryan Williams, him back in the fold for Alabama next season, take a little bit of pressure off Kevin Concepcion, allow them to be able to attack downfield. Also, Alabama, it's worth noting, I think they have a little bit more of a desire to push vertical. Like, the offense this year was like Jalen Milroe is the best athlete on the field. He can throw the football, but we really get cooking when he's cooking on the ground. Also, there's nobody outside of Ryan Williams to pop the top on a defense. You add Kevin Concepcion, potentially someone who can push the ball more vertical for Alabama. Alabama, even with what I just said about their limitations offensively this year, they were still top 10 in college football when it came to yards per pass. So I like Kevin Concepcion to potentially end up at Alabama. That, to me, makes a lot of sense. That would be the match I would pick out for him. Now, you got not one, but two big-time Kentucky transfer wide receivers. We'll start with Berrien Brown. Dane Key also in the portal, but Berrien Brown to me is most intriguing just because of the way that you can utilize him in the return game, utilize him in the screen game. Like, just get the ball to Berrien Brown, dude. Like, it's not that hard. If I'm the OC, get it to him, get it to him consistently. The match for me with him is LSU. Now, I think a lot of this is probably contingent upon Garrett Nussmeier coming back to LSU. My personal opinion is it would benefit Garrett Nussmeier to get another year in Baton Rouge. But like if I'm Berrien Brown, I want to go somewhere where I know I'll get a pretty high volume of targets. I know we're going to throw the football. I know we got a quarterback. So Garrett Nussmeier comes back, checks one of those boxes. LSU last year threw the ball 60% of the time. Berrien Brown really splashed on the scene in college football his freshman year. Why? Because he had a quarterback in Will Levis. Past couple of years, Berrien Brown's been trying to make it go with sticks and glue here. Like, he's been trying to just piece it together, paper-mache it all together. I would love that fit for him. In the Joe Sloan offense, a little more wide open. He becomes more of a focal point. Kyron Lacey gone to the league, hypothetically. I think that would make a lot of sense. So, Berrien Brown getting to stay in the SEC, still have that filter for the NFL draft, and just be another weapon for Garrett Nussmeier in Baton Rouge. I think that would make a ton of sense. Now, Dane Key is another receiver that's transferring from Kentucky. And here's the thing, like, for both Berrien Brown and Dane Key, it's hard to blame either of those guys, man. Like, what I just said about Berrien Brown in the quarterback situation, the same way I feel about Dane Key. You can't blame him. Like, he's doing his best with, and Devin Leary I thought was going to be a lot better than he was at Kentucky. Brock Vandagriff, same deal, thought he'd be a lot better. Like, they gave it the old college try, pun intended. Dane Key averaged 14 yards a catch as well during his career at Kentucky. You got two ballers here that are looking to go play somewhere else and hopefully have a little more success with a better quarterback. One destination that's in the mix for Dane Key that I think makes sense and I think is probably the match for him is Nebraska. One part of this is his receiver coach from Kentucky is now at Nebraska. That happened all within the last week or so. So, again, people commit to people. Dane Key follows his receiver coach. And also, by the way, playing with the quarterback in Dylan Raiola, who can, spin it quite a bit, a little Pat Mahomes Jr. out there, that would make sense to me. So I think with the demand for Nebraska to go get more weapons for Dylan Raiola and for the personal connection for a Dane Key to Nebraska as his receiver coach, that to me feels like a match made in heaven. So I would love that one. Now, here's a couple of other interesting ones. Yesterday, if you're tracking on the socials, if you're following the On3 Twitter account, following Pete Nakos, which, again, if you're not doing that, let's lock in. No more funny business. Time to lock in, all right? Follow both those accounts. Deuce Robinson, former 5-star. Get that alert. Hey, he's jumping in the portal. Now, Deuce Robinson was previously at USC. He's going to go somewhere else. Georgia was in the mix for him towards the end of his recruitment out of high school. Deuce Robinson, I think, will be someone who continues to play two sports because he's just a freak show baseball player as well. You know what? When I look at the way that he projects going forward, I'm not so sure I don't like him at Texas. Georgia, again, makes sense. They need receivers. All that is true. But, again, if I'm Deuce Robinson, Texas baseball program, from my understanding, is pretty solid. Again, I'm not a baseball guy, but that's what the streets are telling me. The security at quarterback, I think, is a massive part of this. Arch Manning being the guy for you next year and the idea of playing with him on the gridiron, that to me makes a ton of sense. Now, I think the pushback would be, well, hey, listen, JD, Texas is a loaded wide receiver room. 100% true. Ryan Wingo is an absolute stud. I'm sure that they will probably be a portal destination for other guys as well, seeing the success they've had with an Adonai Mitchell and with Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden. But here's the deal. There's very few, if any, wide receivers running around in that room that are 6'6", 220 pounds. Any way you slice it, Deuce Robinson is a different kind of player than Texas has in that wide receiver room. So bottom line, you always need dudes that are 6'6", 220 and can go track fly balls for you. That's the limit does not exist to the kind of guys or the number of those kind of guys that you need. So I like Texas for him. Go be another portal success story for Steve Sarkisian. One more I want to talk about here, C.J. Daniels. Now, he was previously in the transfer portal. He's a guy that we talked about a little bit when he jumped into the transfer portal. I think he's a little bit more of a low-profile entry just because he didn't have a crazy, splashy year at LSU. But you rewind the tape a year ago, he was a 1,000-plus yard wide receiver at Liberty under Hugh Freeze and under Caden Salter playing quarterback for him. Now, he goes to LSU, and like I said, not a super splash year, but he still had over 400 yards receiving. He would have been third in Georgia's current wide receiver room with the numbers of over 400 yards. I believe he was north of 40 receptions as well. The bottom line is Georgia, they need receivers. C.J. Daniels, I believe, from the state of Georgia. Maybe you get back home, throw on the G logo. I don't think the fact that the wide receiver room at Georgia won't be enormously crowded hurts things as well. I think C.J. Daniels to Georgia makes a ton of sense. Going back to what I just said about the crowded receiver room. The pushback there would be, well, JD, don't you want guys that are going to take pressure off of C.J. Daniels if I commit to a school like that? I think C.J. Daniels just came from a school like that in LSU. He's done the whole deal where you got Kyron Lacey in the room, and you got, you go down the line here. You got White, I believe is his name. Who's the slot receiver at LSU? Escaping. I can't remember his name. Anyway, Tre'Davious White, is that who it is? Aaron Anderson. Okay, I'm tripping here. I got my LSU guys all mixed up. Aaron Anderson, thank you. Bottom line here, you've done that before. Go play in a room where you're going to be the guy, get targets, be close to home. Makes all the sense in the world to me. So those are the matches we like when it comes to the transfer portal wide receiver market. Hey, big shout out to the assist there with Cato on the ones and twos, man. I'm just the Rolodex of LSU players just rolling through my mind. Tre'Davious White didn't even play wide receiver, so I don't know why it came to my mind, but it is what it is. We ball. Glad to have you all tuned in. Again, make sure you've liked the video if you haven't already. College football playoff, man, right around the corner. Like I said, our bracket prediction is coming out for you tomorrow on the live show, so stay tuned in. We'll have more portal news. We'll have more intel there to talk through, but tomorrow making our prediction for who's going to win the whole darn thing. That'll be a lot of fun. But what we talk about a lot on this show is the actual games within the game. One thing that I think we pride ourselves on here on this show is being football guys. like Caden Smith, producer of the show, he wouldn't tell you, but multi-time, all Sun Belt kind of safety over there. Your boy played some college football as well. So we appreciate the game within the game, the X's and O's. With that being said, putting our heads together, trying to prep for this show, what are the matchups that are going to determine some of these first-round college football playoff games? Because you got a lot of, like, appetizing logos and great games in themselves, but, like, there's a couple here that I think will decide the game, within the game, that is. And you look at Texas and Clemson, a lot of storyline juice there, right? We talk about Klubnik versus Ewers round 2. They played each other in high school, and, Cade Klubnik returns to Austin to play in his hometown against his hometown team. But, like, to me, this game is all about the Texas secondary, Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba, against these young bucks at the Clemson wide receiver core. Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore. We talked about them a lot going into the year as like, hey, could they kind of rebrand that Clemson offense, make them a little more explosive? They've done that much. Now, Antonio Williams is the leading receiver for Clemson in the slot. He's a stud. You move him around. He's going to be a guy for you, no way around it. But the guys that have the largest yards per catch numbers are who I just mentioned. Bryant Wesco, right around 17.9 yards a catch, and then TJ Moore at 15 yards a catch. Why is that important? You're not going to beat Texas running the football. I love Phil Maffa. I love Cade Klubnik's legs. The reality is Texas is allowing 3.1 yards a carry. So if you want to run your head into a brick wall that is the Texas defensive line, be my guest. Maybe you'll have some success. The fear is you wouldn't have success until like the third or fourth quarter. At that point, you're down 17-0, maybe even more, and like, hey, I don't think that's making the dent that you actually want it to make. So with that being said, I think you probably have to score with Texas. Like, I don't think this is a situation where you walk in and win a rock fight the way that Georgia did in the SEC title game. So if I'm Clemson, again, I'm looking at these wide receivers. I'm also probably looking a good amount at Garrett Riley and saying, hey, brother, we need you to get in the bag this week. we need the window dressing. We need you to dial up some shots, create some space downfield, because we have to have explosives if we want to beat Texas. Because if Texas and that that secondary locks up that Clemson wide receiving core, like I just mentioned, Jahdae Barron is going to be a Jim Thorpe Award finalist. It's going to be a very long night. It's going to be a very, very long night. You don't beat Texas, I don't believe at least, in this game if you're Clemson having drives that go 10 plays, 11 plays, 13 plays, because Texas, I believe, will have the ability to turn right around, have a 6-play scoring drive, and then it's like, okay, reset. Can we do that again? You got to have explosives to beat Texas. A lot of that will fall on the Clemson Young Bucks at wide receiver. Now, the game that I think is probably the most intriguing from a logo standpoint for all of us, the 8 and the 9 seed, got Tennessee going to Columbus, Ohio, to play Ohio State. And we've talked about the vibes in this one in itself. Like, Ohio State as a fan base has got to bring the juice. That's neither here nor there. The game within the game that we're tracking, though, Ohio State and the run game, man, versus this Tennessee front that was talked about all offseason. We went and saw them in spring practice. They're like legit 12, 13 deep at the defensive line. When Will Howard got to Ohio State, I think the discussion was always, hey, can Will Howard be a difference maker for you? Now, keep in mind, that phrase difference maker does not mean like, hey, can he take over a game? It does not mean can Will Howard go for 300, 400 yards on any given Saturday and just be the eraser for you. That's not what Will Howard's asked to do. And so while the Michigan game leaves just a bitter taste in your mouth if you're an Ohio State fan, I'd also look at what you didn't do on the ground in that game. Ohio State ran for 77 yards against Michigan. Now, the Will Howard interceptions, there's no way to put lipstick on that pig, but let's be honest here. Like, Will Howard is not being asked to come in and throw for 300 against Michigan to allow you to win that football game. It's what the game required, but I think a large part of him having to try and go out and be that guy for you and not have a run game behind him, that's setting up your quarterback for failure. So going back to the point here, Tennessee's allowing 2.9 yards a carry. That's number 6 in all of college football. They have a sack rate within the top 30. So what I'm trying to get to here is if you can't run the football and you got to live in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, James Pierce is coming for you, man. I promise you, like, Tim Banks is going to dial it up, and there will be a lot of pressure in Will Howard's face, and this thing could avalanche very quickly. So with that being said now, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, this is the game. This gives me the vibes a lot of when Ohio State went to Happy Valley earlier in the year, and they're doing the whole makeshift offensive line. They're still doing the makeshift offensive line. There's no way around that. But, like, I would love to see Chip Kelly get back in the bag and attack the perimeter, because I don't think this is a situation where, it's funny to say this out loud, I don't think Ohio State in the trenches straight up can beat Tennessee in the trenches. how wild of a phrase or a sentence is that to say within the last 2 years, given what Tennessee's been on defense? Shows the sign of the times. So I think if you're Ohio State, you got to find ways to get the ball on the edge and get speed and space. That's where I think Ohio State can really win. A lot would fall, I think, on the perimeter blocking as well. Jeremiah Smith, everyone's seen the pictures on Twitter and on any social media platform where he just looks like he's developed in a lab. We need those biceps on the perimeter blocking, brother. All right, this is where we earn our keep if we're Jeremiah Smith when it comes to, what do they say? No block, no rock. This would be the spot to be able to block and eventually get the rock. Set yourself up for success downfield and be a difference maker for you in the run game. So the Tennessee front versus the Ohio State run game and Chip Kelly is going to be absolutely massive. I can't wait to watch that chess game. Now, speaking of chess games, you got what I've labeled the Wiltfong Bowl, because Steve Wiltfong here at On 3 is from Indiana. You got Notre Dame and Indiana in that one. That'll be phenomenal. I think that's one of the sneakier big-time matchups of the entire college football first round, or college football playoff first round. As I was trying to break this thing down, I just got to thinking, like, hey, what would be the thing for Notre Dame that could break this thing open? Because they're going to be favored in the football game, I believe. What would be the thing that could break it open for them as the higher rated seed? And I kept going back to this same idea of, well, if they can get explosive plays, the defense is phenomenal to lean on people. The run game in itself should be able to kind of grind it out and shorten the game if they end up getting that situation. So who's the home run hitter for Notre Dame? Jeremiah Love, the dude that averages 8 yards a touch. Now, Indiana has made a living off of not allowing explosive plays and allowing their offense to kind of put the pedal to the metal against, let's call a spade here, lesser competition, but still score 40 a game. Indiana's allowing 4.1 yards a play. That's top 3 in America. If Jeremiah Love is able to have a couple of explosives here or there, maybe he rips off a 40-yard touchdown run, maybe it's a little screen that goes for 50 and gets them into, scoring position. If they can have those kinds of plays and then puts the pressure on Indiana against the best opponent they've played to this point in the year since Ohio State and force them to answer scores, I don't know if you want to live that way, especially in South Bend, Indiana. I don't think that's really the situation you want to find yourself in. So Jeremiah Love versus Bryant Haynes, the Indiana defensive coordinator, I think that matchup and how they try to neutralize him will dictate the game flow. Because outside of Jeremiah Love, man, who are you worried about at Notre Dame? And that sounds a little bit harsh, but I love Riley Leonard. I think he's been phenomenal in that system. I think Bo Collins is great. I love Jaden Greathouse, but there's nobody within this Notre Dame offense where I'm like, man, we got to make sure we keep a lid on that guy. It starts and ends with Jeremiah Love. So if he gets rolling, he has the explosives, and Indiana has to answer against this Notre Dame defense, I think that could kind of be a situation where things get a little bit uncomfortable if you're an Indiana fan. Last one here, we got SMU and Penn State. Another sneaky matchup. Maybe not the logos that you thought you were going to get in round one, but still a lot of fun. The SMU backfield, wildly underrated. Wildly underrated. Kevin Jennings and Brashard Smith are must-see TV. Brashard Smith, man, transferring from Miami, a Rhett Lashley guy. Don't look now, he's averaging 6 yards a carry. Talk about just electric in the open field. Also, I think he's got over 30 catches as a receiver. So they're going to utilize him. He's going to get his. And then on top of that, I mentioned Kevin Jennings. If you watched him play against Clemson, he didn't have the Lenora Sellers breaking 18 tackles kind of day, but he's making that Clemson front work back and forth across the field to try and track him down for a sack. So the bottom line here is, I think for Penn State, the matchup that I'm watching to try and attack that backfield is Abdul Carter. We've all seen the celebration where he does the 2-1s and holsters them. It's absolutely sick. There needs to be a lot of that in this game for Penn State to win. And it sounds funny because you look at the spread and you look at the logos, you're like, Penn State should roll. Should's a funny word in college football, especially in 2024. I want to see, if I'm Penn State, I want to see Abdul Carter be proactive as opposed to reactive. I'm not dialing this up if I'm Tom Allen, the DC at Penn State. I'm not dialing up a Abdul Carter spy on Kevin Jennings. Okay, we'll just see where he goes and shadow him. No, you go get after him. You set up 2nd and 15, 3rd and 17, and you put them in position to where they can't play their game. Because if they do get to play their game and they get to put the pressure on you, the disaster world here that I think exists for Penn State, and it's funny to say out loud, the disaster could be you force your offense to try and put out a performance like they did against Oregon. It was good to see, if you're a Penn State fan, to see Drew Aller and that offense account for 37 points. I don't think you want to ask to have them do it again for a second game in a row, as much as you think about Tyler Warren and Drew Aller in that backfield. So if they can, force some situations where they force those second and longs, third and longs. Then the havoc starts, and then maybe Penn State gets to kind of dictate terms from there and control the game. So that's going to be a really key matchup, I think, in determining Penn State and SMU and who ends up winning. So a lot of really fun matchups across the board here. Like if you are like a Todd McShay or an NFL talent evaluator guy, like you are licking your chops at some of these round one matchups when it comes to the game within the game, as we are personally on this show also licking our chops for this one. Quick sidebar, this isn't a segment. Maybe we'll do this tomorrow. Am I the only one that thinks the Bill Belichick thing in North Carolina makes no sense? Again, this is not a segment we're doing right now, so we don't have like any graphics for this. I just had to get this off my chest because he may get hired, I guess, like today or tomorrow, potentially how this whole carousel seems to work. Bill Belichick, not a juice guy, not a run through the wall kind of guy. You got professional athletes who are like, this is my job. I didn't like playing for him. I'm 18 years old, and I got Bill Belichick ripping me and telling me to go to study hall. I'm like, dude, I'm hitting the portal so fast. So I get it. I get the appeal. Super Bowl rings, they talk. I'm all here for it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. It makes no sense to me. I mean, I believe the whole conversation around Mac Brown and his age and things is, it sounds like it contributed to him not being the job or not having the head coaching job anymore in Chapel Hill. Bill Belichick's like right around that same ballpark when it comes to how old he is. So I'm just saying I don't get it. Again, we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but I had to get my 2 cents out there if something were to happen within the next 24 hours to 48 hours, if we didn't get a chance to say that. So in that situation, Bill Belichick would kind of have a redemption arc, a revenge arc, if you will, on the sport of football with how things ended in New England, and then maybe goes out to Chapel Hill and has success. You know who else is seeking a redemption arc? How about Ohio State? How about the Buckeyes, man? Because you look at what they have ahead of them, and I mean, like, dude, this path is absolutely brutal. If you're an Ohio State fan, you're sitting there in October, early November, you're like, hey, listen, worst case scenario, we're the 5 seed, maybe the 6 seed. Okay, so we're playing probably the 12 seed or the 11 seed in the first round, and then we get, the Big 12 champ in the second round or what have you. Life comes at you fast, and the Michigan game just turned the entire college football playoff path for Ohio State on its head. Now Ohio State is sitting there at number 8 when it comes to the seedings. You're hosting Tennessee the first round of the college football playoff, and what do you get if you win? A rematch with the number 1 seed Oregon Ducks, who already got you one time. And then potentially if you win that game, you end up playing Texas. So, like, it's very obvious when you look at this bracket which side you want to be on. Ohio State did not want to be on this side based on how the seeding shook out. But I think it's actually interesting when you look at what this could mean for Ohio State. Because to win a national championship, which, make no mistake about it, that is the standard at Ohio State. Even with the loss to Oregon, even with the loss to Michigan, the price of admission does not change for that Ohio State logo, all right? They will play the two likely, again, this is if the seeding were to hold, it is likely that Ohio State would have to be the teams with the top 2 odds to win the national championship. Translation, it's the Hunger Games. And I would also add this, it's almost tougher for Ohio State that they have to play at home in round 1, which sounds bizarre, but Kirk Herbstreit said this during the playoff ranking reveal broadcast, and I would 100% agree. If things don't go great that first drive for Ohio State against Tennessee, or if in the first half Ohio State's down like 3-10, or if it's just like unimpressive in any way, you know how quick the folks in Columbus will be to boo Ryan Day and to boo that operation? Like, the advantage of home field is supposed to be the positive vibes, the momentum, the inertia, the energy. That's not going to exist after the Michigan loss if things don't look good early. So even that's a little bit volatile. I wonder if you're Ohio State, you'd rather maybe get on the road and play somewhere else. I digress. The bottom line here is there's no safety net for Ohio State. None. You hear some extreme takes of like, well, hey, if they lose round 1, I'd fire him on the tarmac. Like, I don't know that's that far off. Like, the standard is so high at Ohio State. If you lose in the first round at home after the loss to Michigan, like, I think that's probably a reality. And that's not me calling for that. We've said multiple times, I would not fire Ryan Day, even if you lose in the first round. I don't think you do that. His resume is too good. He's won too much. I think the pool to draw from is far too slim, but like, I do believe that would be the reality we would be living in if they do lose to Tennessee in the first round of the college football playoff. And like, far be it for me to say this, but let's say it's just even unimpressive and lackluster and they come out flat. So that's one part of this. But let's go ahead and go back to the topic at hand here. The revenge arc for Ohio State, the potential of that. In a sick, twisted, just borderline sadistic way. This might be the path that Ohio State fans wanted and maybe needed if you're Ohio State to kind of hit a reset on the optics. Because if Ohio State were to be fortunate enough to find themselves in Penn State seating and say, hey, Ohio State, good news and bad news. Bad news, you're not the Big Ten champs. Good news, though, you play SMU in round 1. Weren't they a G5 school a year ago? Yep, you got them in the first round. Okay, cool. Who do we have next? You actually have a literal G5 team in Boise State. Okay, cool. Like let's roll. I mean, rosters aren't everything, but we feel pretty good about our roster versus those rosters. If that were to be your reality and you win both those games, how hollow would that feel? Like, I don't think anybody in Columbus, Ohio, if they go out and do that with that path, is saying, okay, you know what, Ryan Day, we forgive you 2 playoff wins. That's good with us. And let's say they go win the national championship. I'm sure it feels good. I'm sure that doesn't feel hollow, but you do go back to the path and you're like, they kind of caught a break here. The stars kind of aligned for Ryan Day. Now, again, that is not the stars that have aligned for them. They have, again, what I just mentioned. They got to play Tennessee in the first round, potentially Oregon, and then potentially Texas, depending on how things break. So it's not a situation that is necessarily catering to an easy path for Ohio State. But going back to what I just said, if you're the most diehard, twisted Ohio State fan that is anti-Ryan Day, wouldn't you want to see him go up against the most difficult competition in the sport to win the whole darn thing? Like, don't you want to see the toughest test, the road of most resistance to feel better about Ryan Day? Because if you go out and do that, like if you go out and beat who I just said you would have to beat in Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and then likely, I suppose, eventually Georgia in the national championship from that side of the bracket, if we're taking the highest seed, like, I think that might be actually exactly what you need to boost the approval rating at Ohio State for Ryan Day. And this isn't me saying they somehow excuse the fact that they lost to Michigan now 4 years in a row. I'm not saying that. But I do think you look at the path, you look at what he did as a team, and both as Ryan Day to get his team ready to go run the gauntlet there, you're like, okay, we're good. Like maybe we're not 100% okay with everything that happened against Michigan. Like we're still not cool with that. But let's go ahead and call it even for now. I think that would be the way that you would feel if you're an Ohio State fan. Again, not excusing it, but you do look at what he had to go through. You're like, all right, that's good enough for us. There's a book that I love that I've plugged a few times on the show. I'll do it one more time. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Not Ryan Day, Ryan Holiday. I don't know if they're related, but I would venture to say no. The book is essentially about your greatest obstacles being the reason why you're successful. If Ryan Day does what I just said, runs that gauntlet, and wins the national championship, that would be, I think, the reason why you would feel differently about Ryan Day in Columbus. And I'll take it a step further. That would be, I think, the most legitimate national championship in history if Ohio State does that. Not just from the sheer number of games, but from the sheer, just talent they have to play against when it comes to the opponent level. So I'm very curious to see how this plays out. But if Ohio State does run the gauntlet, like I've said now 3 or 4 times throughout this segment, it's game, set, match. There's no more objection you can have to Ryan Day. At that point, it accentuates the Michigan problem. You probably are like, well, how the heck did we lose to that Michigan team that was down this year and is playing, I think, in like the Reliant Quest Bowl? I don't know how that happened. But you're like, okay, we're not crazy for thinking that this was a guy that could go win a national championship with this roster. It legitimizes everything, legitimizes the national championship in itself if they get it done. But don't get it twisted. There is no safety net for Ohio State here these first couple of rounds. Incredible storylines there heading into that one as they welcome the Vols to the shoe, which will be great. Now, we just mentioned Ohio State, mentioned the Michigan problem they seem to have. Michigan had a problem, I suppose you could say, at offensive coordinator. There's a reason, I'm sure, why they were in the market for a new offensive coordinator. Looks like they got themselves one, okay? Chip Lindsey, former offensive coordinator at North Carolina, he's going to be the new play caller in Ann Arbor. So what does this mean? What do we think it means for Bryce Underwood and going forward? Also, just what can you expect if you're a Michigan fan? We'll talk about it right now. First things first, if you're watching in a live capacity, thank you. Hit the subscribe button under your picture. If you're watching as a one-off video, also thank you. If you're a Michigan fan finding this video, finding this channel for the first time, it's college football, nothing but college football. So make sure you're locked in, make sure you're subscribed. Going back to what I said, Chip Lindsey, this to me screams Bryce Underwood hire. Because I forget if I said it on a video, if I tweeted it out into the Twitterverse a few different times. You were never going to have Bryce Underwood be your quarterback. Bryce Underwood, for those of y'all that are catching up here. The number one prospect in the class of 2025 plays quarterback for you, flipped from LSU. Special player. You were never going to have him under center for you with a fullback. And I love Max Bredesen. I love fullbacks. I don't think you were going to have Bryce Underwood under center in the power I and say, let's go ahead and run 34 whams 17 times a game and have that be our attack here. It wasn't going to be the case. You spread it out. You open it up. You let Bryce Underwood be special. You go get him some weapons, and you play a high-octane, fun style of offense. Not to say that the skull bashing that Michigan has done the last couple of years under Sharon Moore and under Jim Harbaugh hasn't been fun football. But you're not maximizing the Ferrari of a quarterback you have if that's your approach. I mean, Bryce Underwood is a tremendous passer, also a freak show athlete. So there's that part of this. Going back to Chip Lindsey, he has a quarterback pedigree, coaching guys like Jarrett Stidham when he was at Auburn, coaching Drake May, who was a top 3 pick in last year's draft. There's some of that quarterback language he speaks, in addition to keeping, I believe, what Michigan ultimately still wants to be and will always want to be, regardless of who's at quarterback, regardless of who's the head coach. They'll want to be tough. They'll want to be tough. Now, at North Carolina a year ago, even with the spread concepts and what Chip Lindsey did, they averaged 176 yards on the ground. That's punch-you-in-the-face football. That's Michigan football. So that's still going to be there. Like, we're kidding ourselves if we think the secret ingredient that has allowed Michigan to beat Ohio State now, the last 4 years, is somehow going to change with a new quarterback and a new coordinator. They're going to do everything in their power to bottle that up and keep that there. Because what we said after Michigan beat Ohio State was it was never a matter of talent for Michigan in that game over Ohio State. It was just sheer grit, toughness, blue collar, some would say. Like, the things that you can't coach, the things that have nothing to do with how many stars are next to your name. Now, granted, Michigan is bringing in the quarterback with 5 stars next to his name. But if you keep that 5-star talent level at quarterback, and then you add in the toughness element, that's going to be massive. And that's going to be, I think, ultimately very, very lethal for the rest of college football. Going back to how we opened this whole show, if you're watching live, we said styles make fights. It has never been more important to be well-rounded in the sport of college football. Michigan won the national title last year, I believe, because of the ability to make you pay downfield with J.J. McCarthy and some of those weapons on the outside. Going forward with Bryce Underwood, they'll have the ability to be tough and also be able to stretch the field vertically with Chip Lindsey as the OC and his quarterback pedigree. So this is massive for Michigan on a number of fronts. Let's take a look at what it means, though, like in the here and now. The portal is popping. The portal is showing no mercy. It's taking, it's giving, it's everything in between. Now, if you're Michigan, you can go market to skill players, go market to top wide receiver talent and say, hey, listen, we're going to have a quarterback in the future. We got a fun, open offense we're going to play in here. Come be a part of it. Here's what you can expect. It's one thing to have a projection and a vision and a promise and all that. That's all well and good, and I think you have success doing that if you're truthful and authentic and honest, and I think that's who Sharon Moore ultimately is. But to be able to pull up the tape at North Carolina and say, here's where we see you, here's what you're going to be for us, are you in? At that point, you've done all you can do. And at that point, I think that the results on the field, what Chip Lindsey has done at North Carolina and throughout his career, should speak volumes and should speak a lot louder than any potential promise or vision, if you will. So Michigan has a new direction. I don't know if they're rebranding so much as revamping with what they are on offense, and I cannot wait to see Bryce Underwood under center for the Wolverines, whether it's next year or whether it's in 2 years, depending on what they do in the portal here. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. So the Michigan offense has been revamped. Chip Lindsey, your new play caller in Ann Arbor, keeping that same nasty toughness that I think Sharon Moore will ultimately keep in place out there for the Wolverines. So the cogs in the college football roster world are continuing to churn, man. You got portal movement. We played some portal matchmaker today on the show. Tomorrow, we'll have some more portal intel for you, some more portal updates, if you will. Josh Newberg's doing a great segment over on the On 3 Recruits channel talking about 5 stars in the portal. And y'all, I told him before the show, we may just copy him. We may just say that's a great idea. What is it? Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Maybe we will flatter Josh Newberg tomorrow. So we appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. Really quickly, want to make sure y'all know the hard count brought to you also by our friends over at Roback. Now, I've told y'all this many times. Roback, they have been with us for a minute now. Like I say, they've been with us. They've been with the hard count since before we got to On 3. Since we did this show in a lobby in Waco, Texas, they believe in us. They are college football people through and through. And it's great to be, upstanding people and to be great to interact with and communicate with. It's even better when they have a killer product. I mean, the quarter zips, the polos, We're into crispy season, as I say here. I got some joggers that are just absolute cash money from Roback. So if you're wanting to get something for yourself for the chilly weather, or maybe you're looking to get a little Christmas gift action going. I know it's that time of year. Use code JD, those 2 letters. No periods in between, just J and D at RHOBACK.com. Save yourself a smooth 20% off of all buttery polos, shorts, shirts, joggers, hoodies, and a partridge in a pear tree. So appreciate y'all being dialed in. Appreciate Roback. Again, that's code JD over at Roback.com. 20% off for all of that goodness. Again, man, we appreciate the heck out of y'all. This is a lot of fun. We're entering into that part of the year where we got postseason action. We got guys changing rosters. Like, there's a lot to keep track of. Again, want y'all a part of this. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're locked in. And we're going to make sure we have an absolute blast talking about the greatest sport on the face of planet Earth. Feel very lucky. For Caden Smith on the 1s and 2s, for myself, JD PicKell, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Hey, you matter. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.